The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us that if a person has a machlokas that is l'shem shemayim for the sake of heaven, sofo lehiskayim. And there'll be continuity. That machlokas, that argument or disagreement, will lead to something that is effective. But if a person has a machlokas which is not l'shem shemayim, not for the sake of heaven, then ein sof lehiskayim will only lead to things which are destructive. And the Mishnah gives examples. It says, what's an example of a machlokas which is l'shem shemayim for the sake of heaven? This is the machlokas between Hillel and Shammai. What is a machlokas which is not l'shem shemayim? That's the machlokas that we read about in this week's parsha, the machlokas of Korach v'Adaso, of Korach and his group. And the commentaries pointed out that it doesn't say the machlokas between Korach and Moshe. It says the machlokas between Korach and his group. Because besides for the fact that Korach was challenging Moshe, even within his group, there was infighting as well. And each person was there not for the sake of heaven, although it seemed to be on the surface, they were asking for something that was holiness, they were asking for to be on a higher spiritual level. But in truth, it all stemmed only from selfishness, and it only stemmed from personal desire for greatness. And as opposed to Hillel and Shammai, what was Hillel and Shammai's motivation for machlokas when they were arguing? It was purely for this. It was only for the right reasons. It was only because they really wanted to get to the bottom line. They wanted to get to the truth. And many times in our lives, we have disagreements. We're all different people. We think differently. And therefore, a lot of times we approach a situation differently. And when we're part of any sort of organization, any sort of group, often there'll be disagreements about how things should be handled. So how do we know whether our argument is l'shem shemayim, is for the sake of heaven, or maybe we're just doing it for personal reasons? Someone would share with me a beautiful thought from the Chassid Yavitz. The Chassid Yavitz says the following. He says, if you want to know if your argument is l'shem shemayim, is for the sake of heaven, then look at the person that you're arguing with the next day. If you can go over to him the next day and give him a big smile and give him a big good morning and a big hello, and you have no hard feelings towards him, then chances are your machlokas is l'shem shemayim. But if you can't look at the person the next day, if you despise the person, then chances are your machlokas is not l'shem shemayim. Why is that? Because when there's a machlokas l'shem shemayim, when you're arguing for the sake of heaven, you're not really arguing. You're really looking for the same thing. You're looking for the truth. You're looking for the best way to serve Hashem. You're looking for the emes. And because you're both looking for the truth, you're both trying to accomplish the same thing, you're really on the same team. So there's no animosity between you. But on the other hand, when you're doing it only for personal reasons, and the other person's also only doing it for personal reasons, so then there is that animosity between you, because you're looking for entirely different things. Hillel and Shammai, they were only looking for the truth. The Gemara tells us that even though they had many bitter machlokasin, they had many arguments between them, and they constantly, throughout the Mishnah, throughout the Gemara, we find machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, but they were still best of friends. They would still marry into each other's families, and they still got along, because even though they looked at things differently, they were really on the same team. They were all looking for the truth. They were all looking for the emes. As opposed to Korach and his group, where even though at the surface it seemed to be that they were on the same side, they were really on very different sides. Each one was only out for their personal benefit. They were only arguing for selfish reasons. So many times, again, in our lives, we have arguments and we have disagreements. We have a different way of approaching things. Let's make sure that all our machlokasin, let's make sure that even our disagreements are only l'shem shemayim, are only in the sake of heaven. And then, like the Mishnah says, sofon l'skayim, that there'll be continuity to them and they'll accomplish things, and will, from those arguments, from those disagreements, which can lead to discussion, they'll only lead to growth and going to higher and higher levels. Have a great Shabbos.